Okay. Hello, everybody. It is your host, KGA2 Live, aka the Bald Brawlers, Kirby, aka Kirby Gunnarsson, your former champion. I'm here with my co-host, as always, Zachariah Robeg. Zach, what's going on, my man?
Tell you what, Curb, it is so much better rolling into the podcast after a dub. I like it would have been tough to roll in here 0-2. Now I'm not gonna dance on Pootie's grave. We had a hard fought match, came down to Monday night. That probably was a tough way to lose, so I'm not gonna dance on Pootie's grave. He handled the loss like a man, but I just it feels so much better rolling in with a W. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Oh my God, I know. I felt the same way because I was sitting there watching my game, and we'll touch base on it soon. But I was looking terrible for most of the game. Then all of a sudden, I had one player decide to go fucking bananas in the second half, and I happened to be a Titan. So it feels good to be 1-1. And the thing is, there's a huge logjam of 1-1 teams, which kind of makes it exciting. Only two undefeateds and two teams that don't have a win. So it's going to be a very interesting year. But you know what? It's just the start, and we're off to tomorrow, baby. Week 3 is around the corner. But before we touch base on week 3, we want to give a quick week 2 recap, just high level on a few games. So the first two games I kind of wanted to hit on were some of the bigger ones. So the first one I think was between the matches we highlighted last week between you and Pootie and Ross and Josh. For you and Pootie, the high level stuff obviously was just Aaron Jones and Hawkinson going off on Monday night. I mean, Aaron Jones gets 4 touchdowns with it all, absolutely crushes it despite a tough week 1. So that was huge for you. And for Pootie, the big thing that I worry about his team is Cooper Kupp has been like a top 2 receiver, and he still started the season 0-2. So he's potentially wasting some of Kupp's greatest games. And that trade he did for Hunt, his RB2, he only got him less than 6 points in a good matchup. So that's one thing I worry about Pootie's team. And the other matchup, wanted to touch base on quickly, was the Ross and Josh matchup of undefeated. So Ross, as similar to last year, he just freaking kills it early in the year. Kelsey and Murray continue to be two of the greatest values that he had. They combined for over 50 points. And then Josh mainly is just he really didn't have a bad week. It's just his Cowboy stack failed him because they were running for touchdowns instead of throwing. And Saquon, he looked a little better, but he's still not 100%. So what are your thoughts quick on those two matchups first?
So I'm going to disagree with you slightly in one spot. So Kareem Hunt, so he's playing Houston. So like Houston is a bad run defense, but I think Kareem Hunt's best games will be when they're like losing.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? When they're playing a good team and they have to throw the ball, I think Kareem Hunt's going to be on the field a lot more. So I actually thought this was a bad matchup for Kareem Hunt because I felt like Nick Chubb was going to get the majority of the work. I don't know what Nick Chubb ended up with, but Kareem Hunt had a mediocre day because they didn't really need to throw the ball. So I actually think that was a tough matchup for Kareem Hunt because of the way those two go. You make a good point about Cooper Kupp. Pootie's just I'm not and I don't know where Pootie's head's at. I'm not ready to bury him yet. He's had 2 tough weeks. If I'm 0-2, I wouldn't panic yet if I'm him, and we'll maybe touch on that a little bit in the we'll touch on that in the power rankings. As far as Ross and Axe, a little disappointing on both sides, but really it comes down to Ross's onesie positions. Kelsey is easily the best tight end, and Kyler Murray probably is the best quarterback. So he makes it for a tough matchup because he basically dominates you in those 2 positions. So you better really make up for it in the running back and the receiver positions. And this week Saquon Barkley looked good on one run, but didn't have enough to basically overcome those 2 onesie positions. So I think it's early, a lot still to be determined, but I think Ross is out to a good lead or a good start here, and I think that'll reflect in the power rankings.
Yep, absolutely. And so the other 3 matchups we'll touch base on high level was Sap versus Jared. So this was a matchup of our last 2 Sackos, which was pretty hilarious. Neither team did awfully great, but you know what? All you need to do is outscore the team that you're playing that particular week, and you get the win. And despite being the bottom of the power rankings, Sap is now 2-0. Most of his team I looked at trying to get a highlight. really a lot of team was just put in decent performances, no standout with the exception of Mahomes, who had 24, which for a quarterback is good but not outstanding. But kudos to him. Juju did play well, and he got a lot of catches and got a rushing touchdown, and could see some more upside with Deontay Johnson potentially being injured. So kudos to him. And for Jared, one thing that's struggled with him is his second and third round picks. I believe it was James Robinson and George Kittle. They have really struggled for his team. Kittle has not looked the same in that 49ers pass offense, which has struggled, and James Robinson hasn't gotten going under Urban Meyer. So even though Jared had a great pick with CMC, he's really struggled, I think, with the second and third round pick. So that's why he's. Go ahead.
You could even take that one step further. His fourth round pick was Robert Woods, and he's off to a slow start because Cooper Kupp's dominating the Rams receiving total. So you could kind of drag it down even another round. So, but yes, I agree with you. So far, James Robinson and George Kittle have, unfortunately for Jared, gotten off to a slow start. So.
But hey, not unfortunately for me. I mean, there's only 4 teams that make the Sacco, and so as long as Jared stays down there in our division, that's one less team to worry about. So I'm all for that, damn it. But the other 2 games we'll touch base on really quickly. Schultes and Built. So one of the interesting things, we popped up Bill's team last weekend for receivers, but looking at, I think it's hard week to week. I think he has a lot of good receivers. The problem is picking and choosing which receivers have those good weeks. Amari Cooper, we've talked, he's had an injury history. I think he got hurt late in this game, but didn't have a good game altogether. And then Pittman had a big game on the bench. And so it's just going to be tough week to week figuring out who that big play is going to come from, especially with Carson Wentz hurt. It makes Pittman's value potentially go down. And for Schultes, what was impressive on his team, he won despite Alvin Kamara and CEH, his 2 running backs, combining for 7.5 points. And the big thing for his team is his defense, I think, got 2 touchdowns, and Gronk had 2 touchdowns. Surprisingly, comes out of nowhere. I think to be the tight end 1 on the season. So that's been absolutely huge for Schultes.
And Mike Evans catches 2 touchdowns. So basically, all 3 Buccaneers got him 2 touchdowns. So I'll maybe give a peek to my power rankings. I had a tough time with Schultes because I think his team is sort of that sleeping tiger a little bit with Kamara only scoring 5 points and still getting the victory over Built, who we had 2 in the power rankings last week. So I would say that's a very nice victory for Schultes to pull out. So I had a hard time with what to do with Schultes in the power rankings. And as far as Built, I agree with you on the receivers. My biggest question is, what do you do with Zeke? I mean, Tony Pollard right now is looked better to my eyes. Again, I don't want to sound like biased here, but Tony Pollard has looked better. He scored more fantasy points, and he's out there a ton. So if you're Built, I don't really know what else you do with a top 5 running back that's just not playing that well, but you can't feel good about the backup looking better than the top 5 running back you picked.
Yeah, I don't believe I've actually watched any of the Cowboys games, but from everyone I talked to, Pollard just looks a lot more explosive. And one of the biggest attractive parts of Zeke over Henry early in the year was that Zeke actually gets a lot of the passing down work, but that work is almost completely transferred to Tony Pollard. And so with that in mind, that kind of gives the advantage back to Henry, which obviously is advantageous to me because Derrick Henry's awesome, and let's fucking go, baby. And as a Tony Pollard owner, it kind of, I was trying to trade away Tony Pollard last week for the belt for, I think it was, who was the running, Chase Edmonds of Arizona. Like, hey, do you want to flip some heads up? You get the insurance and I get a solid RB3 as a safe option. He didn't pull the trigger, and now I'm not so sure I want to do that. I kind of want to roll this out for a little bit and have Tony Pollard be my potential lottery ticket for the rest of the year, because I think if he does get the starting job, if Zeke would get hurt, he would be a top 5 back potentially.
Well, and he's kind of sneaking into like that Kareem Hunt neck of the woods where it's like you could almost damn near use him in a bye week spot in a pinch, depending on how the matchup goes. But he's got that lottery ticket upside if things were to go awry for Zeke. So, if you're Built, there's nothing you can do. He still scored 16, so here we are kind of shitting on him after 16 pointer. So that's not really fair, but I got to believe Built's kind of sweating a little bit about that Zeke pick.
Yep, for sure. And then the last matchup we'll touch on quickly was me and Luddy, and we talked about earlier where I was looking really rough for most of the game, and then the second half of Titans Seahawks happened, and all of a sudden Derrick Henry reminded everyone why he was the number 5 pick in the fantasy football Yarsky draft, going off for 3 touchdowns and shit, probably over 120 yards and one half of football. So that was a Titans fan. That was a very welcome sight to see. And then as a bonus there, all the points that Luddy was getting from Russell Wilson was throwing it to my guy Tyler Lockett. So that was a huge bonus where even though he was scored some touchdowns, it was coming back more on my end. And it was super nice seeing Tyreek Hill on the Sunday Night Football. They blanketed 2 covered guys on him the whole entire time. So it kind of makes you wonder, is that the way to try and beat the Chiefs and all that stuff? So it's a little interesting where the Chiefs lost to the Ravens, and it's because they blanketed that different coverage. So it'll be interesting if that's the blueprint for NFL defenses going forward.
Yeah, I'm sure Ross is hoping that's what they do because that means Kelsey's just going to dominate the rest of the year. But
yes.
You can't really bury Kyler too much for a loss against a 162 pointer. So you can't do much to Luddy there. It's not like he didn't put up a valiant effort. The only thing you got to worry about is the injuries seem to be piling up for his team. Austin Eckler was tweaked week 1 with a hamstring. It seems like he's coming out of that fine, but that was there early. Deontay Johnson, I haven't heard what the verdict is on him yet. He's got a knee issue. And then you've got Josh Jacobs, who didn't play last week already. It's way early in the season. So seems like he's going to have to rely on a little bit of depth there. But like I said, you can't bury Kyler too much for losing 162, but kudos to you from going least amount of points to most amount of points. Hell of a swing there. So
you know what? If you ain't first, you're last, like the great Ricky Bobby said. And I decided to go last the first week, and then I'll take my $10 payout this week. So that's $10 less that I got to give out to other owners, which always feels good. So I'll take that weekly high score payout and be very happy with that. So with that in mind, we'll touch briefly quick on waivers that ran last night, and then the one trade that happened. So there was really 2 waiver claims that kind of caught my eye. One being your pickup of Justin Fields, and it's really because Justin Fields and running quarterbacks are the cheat code in fantasy football. I know Jalen Hurts, I have him in another league, which doesn't matter as much because this is the Yarsky, but I've experienced it as well because Jalen Hurts through 3 quarters was absolutely terrible. And then in the 4th quarter, I think he had like 60 yards rushing and a touchdown. And he went from having 8 or 9 points to having like 22 points in the span of one drive. So running quarterbacks are the cheat code. And now you have potential insurance. If Fields goes off, you have a second running quarterback that you can kind of filter in those matchups. So I thought that was pretty good pickup by you. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I took the last quarterback, but Jalen Hurts has worked out well, and it's because of that rushing. It will be interesting to see how this whole Andy Dalton starting quarterback baloney goes. I mean, the luxury is I don't feel like I have to press him into the starting lineup instantly. I get a chance. He plays the Cleveland Browns this week. Tough matchup. So I get a chance to wait and see a little bit. So I like the fact that I'm not forced into putting him in there, but I do think, again, I just don't know how, if he plays halfway decent, that they can go back to Andy Dalton, who looked horrible week 1. So I think it is time to turn the keys over to the future, which is good for my pickup. Hopefully he's usable down the stretch and he's not just going to burn a roster spot, I guess is, if I had Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, I don't know if I would have picked him up, but or Kyler Murray or something like that, but I had the last quarterback drafted. He's been playing well. I'd like to see it continue, but like you said, I've got a little bit of insurance there, hopefully.
Yep, and that's an important thing with every roster. Like a lot of fantasy rosters, you kind of assess your risks and all that stuff. It's like, okay, all of a sudden I know that I have 3 good receivers locked in with Michael Thomas coming back on suspension. So even though I don't really feel a need to roster another wide receiver, even though I'm technically thin at the position if one gets hurt. I know I have a guy coming back here in a few weeks that's going to all of a sudden make me strong again. So each team, you kind of mitigate your risk. And like you said, with me having Lamar Jackson, don't feel I need a backup. With having certain positions like that, you kind of mitigate your risk, and then you try and swing for the fence to the other positions that you're weak. So that makes
Yep,
sense.
exactly.
And so with that in mind, that kind of leads into the other big pickup I kind of liked was Bill picking up Rondale Moore. So Moore absolutely went off last week, and the week before I actually watched that game, and he played limited snaps, but looks very explosive out of Purdue, and that playmaking ability is seeming to translate. The only concern I have, but like you said, it's a waiver pickup, so it's a good shot, and especially with the rookie, that snap percentage can grow. And so we'll see if it continues to grow in the coming weeks because Arizona has plenty of weapons. We'll just see if he can carve out a larger role in that offense.
Yeah, I think for Build it was perfect because again, it takes a receiver, a rookie receiver, a little bit to sort of kind of get accustomed to the NFL from everything we hear. So Built being slim at receiver, it is a nice pickup for him, who I think will carve out a role in an offense who's going to chuck it a ton. Their tight end Max Williams went like 9 for 80 or something. I don't expect that to happen every week. So I think Rondale Moore probably will get used by Built later on. I really do believe that. Now he's got COVID, or Antonio Brown's got COVID. So I do think Rondale Moore will get used by Built at some point this year.
Yep, and so that'll be interesting to see what happens from that manifestation. And then with outside of those waivers, it's been kind of quiet, nothing too crazy. So the other big activity that obviously happened earlier was your trade for Damian Harris and Devontae Smith to Ross for AJ Brown. So you want to give a little bit of rationale on that before I kind of do my quick recap on it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was a guy who needed running back depth. I think if you looked at Ross's roster prior to the trade, he had DeAndre Swift and I don't remember who it was.
Jonathan,
his
or no, not was it Jonathan Taylor? Yeah.
Okay, so he needed, his running backs were thin at the bottom. I was looking at it as if, I was trying to do it where I wouldn't have to give up Damian Harris. But I don't blame Ross for going there, and I just felt like AJ Brown hopefully snaps back. He's had a tough couple weeks here, but it looks like right now that the Titans defense is dog shit. So that I think they will get in a couple of games where they're just going to have to chuck it. And I'm just kind of banking on AJ Brown still being the alpha there, despite Julio. So I'm hoping that's what happens. Now, I'd like your opinion on it. Before you start, though, I will tell you I am in heated negotiations for a 3-way trade right now. So I apologize.
Are 3-way trades even a thing right now? Like, is that even feasible? Or
I think we can get it done. I think we're on the finish line. I apologize for being a little preoccupied. Negotiations are running hot, but I think we're just about to the precipice of making history here. So I did want to hopefully not give that the kiss of death, but I would like your opinion on the Damian Harris, Devontae Smith for AJ Brown. I will say it was, again, one of those trades where I give up a running back who I had already used last week and looked really good, and I give up Devontae Smith, who I think will bounce back, had a tough week last week, who would have been my stack with Hurt. So it's one of those trades where I felt bad giving my people up, but I liked what I got. So to me, that's how you determine whether it was a good trade or not. So I'd like your thoughts though.
Yeah, so I think with every team, obviously it comes with context. And so your team, like with your draft strategy, it was load up on a whole bunch of running backs, and then you could potentially use that as trade capital later in the year. That's what I've done in many years past, and that's why me and you traditionally have the most trades year over year, is because we hoard the running back position and then we'll trade it for assets later on. Overall, I thought it was a very fair trade. I thought that you had the amount of running back depth that you can do it. I think waiting a second week to see that Tyson Williams it does look like he's going to keep that role in the offense. So he's pretty solid as an RB3 on your team. And so I like that. And you got a clear upgrade, I think, at wide receiver. The one thing I noted just kind of staying, and I thought the deal was decent for Ross. Devontae Smith, I'm not in love with, but he has other wide receivers that are okay. So he's going to need to continue to dominate those onesie positions. And the only thing that concerns me about Damian Harris is his lack of work in the passing game. But it's just a very interesting nuance. Like you said, the Titans defense, I do watch them religiously. It is absolutely terrible. And AJ Brown currently, I think he has 4 or 5 drops on the year. And so right now that he's getting 8 and 9 targets the last 2 weeks. So he's getting targeted. He's just not focused. But I think he's shown years past, he is an amazing receiver. He'll right those wrongs. It's all in his head. So I thought it was a good trade overall for both sides. I saw both sides, and I was just looking like kind of big picture. I was a little curious. So with your 2 trades, because obviously you acquired Devontae Smith with a trade, you ended up turning Damian Harris and Julio Jones into AJ Brown and Kenyon Drake. And so when you look at it, that seems like a kind of interesting dynamic when you look big picture. So Julio to AJ Brown, you're pretty much saying you believe you got the better, younger Titans receiver. And then going Damian Harris to Kenyon Drake, you probably went down a little bit for running back tiers, but that's where your strongest piece is. So overall, it's just kind of interesting to look at the big picture and how those 2 trades unfolded. And I think it'll be very interesting to see what surmises in the coming weeks. So it'll be interesting to see how everything falls.
All right, Kirby. The trade is officially agreed upon.
So are you officially able to announce it, or is it actually on the app?
I will.
Oh, shit.
So
nope, I don't see anything.
Get your app ready.
Okay.
So what's going to happen is I'm going to accept a trade, and then Pooty will accept a trade, I believe.
All right. I mean, I'm ready. So there's got to be. So you're going to accept the trade, then with the players you get, you're going to send Pooty a trade, and he's going to accept it.
Sort of. I'm going to accept a trade. I just accepted it. You should see it come through.
All right. So we are officially on trade review. So we are going receiving George Kittle for Melvin Gordon and Devin Singletary. Jared, this is why you suck at fantasy football.
Now that's not the end of the trade. So then,
I know. I guess I gotta wait till we see this all.
So then what will happen now is Jared will send. Jared
right,
will
I'm a
trade.
One.
Okay. Jared now will trade. I got to make sure I get this right. Will trade James Robinson and Melvin Gordon to Pooty, and Jared gets Kareem Hunt and Jalen Waddle.
Okay.
Did you follow that?
Yeah, I think I did. So, okay. In the end, who all gets what? You get Kittle.
I get Kittle.
And who did you give up?
I gave up those 2, Devin Singletary, Melvin Gordon.
Okay.
And then Pooty will get James Robinson and Melvin Gordon. So he gets the Broncos backfield.
Yep.
And he gives up Kareem Hunt and Jalen Waddle. So Jared will end up with Kareem Hunt, Devin Singletary, and Jalen Waddle.
Yep. So he will end up with Singletary, Hunt, and Waddle.
Yes, we just accomplished history. I always told you I wanted to do a 3-person trade. So not only did we accomplish a 3-person trade, but we broke it. We literally just agreed on it as we were texting. So it literally couldn't have been better timing. Broke it on the pod. That's freaking awesome.
So my immediate reaction is Jared is the 2-time Sacco for a reason.
You don't like saying.
So he got.
Make sure I say this right.
Singletary, Hunt, and Waddle is who he came up with.
Yep.
And he gave away George Kittle.
And James Robinson.
Yeah, I do not like that trade at all for him.
Okay.
So
Now what
I
about
don't
Pooty?
understand. So Pooty, I understand where he traded away Hunt and Waddle for Robinson and Gordon.
Yep.
So if he was, I like that deal just because Pooty is locked and loaded with three wide receivers that are absolute studs no matter what. He doesn't have to worry
Yep.
about it. His whole weakness is his running back too.
Yep. And
Hunt and James
that's what he.
Robinson, I kind of have in the same tier. So I think they're kind of a push. But getting Melvin Gordon and potentially locking in that Broncos backfield, if one of them is to get injured, the other one comes a workhorse. I think that works a little bit better for him. I think the clear winner in this deal is you, but I guess that's because I'm a George Kittle believer. And I think giving away George Kittle, which was, I still think it's going to be a positional advantage in the long run for people. I think that was a mistake by Jared for a whole bunch of running backs that I don't. So the one he ended up with Singletary, Hunt, and Waddle. Jalen
Yep.
Waddle's quarterback is hurt, and so they're now
Right.
relying on Jacoby Brissett, who can't throw the ball. Kareem Hunt is game script dependent, and Devin Singletary is on a Bills team that is notorious for not being able to run the ball. And so I think that you did good trying to get out of Singletary when you did and get out of Melvin Gordon when you did. I know you tried to trade me Melvin Gordon earlier, and I just laughed and it's like, yeah, I'm not that much of a sucker. So I think that what's the interesting domino that's to fall is you still have one more trade in the books because you have now Hawkinson and Kittle, two elite tight ends. And so I already know that you're going to be trading one of those two tight ends. And so it's just a question of when are you going to potentially try and sell Kittle high? Or are you going to sell Hawkinson high? So it'll be very interesting. I'm happy in the context that I'm playing Jared this week, and I think his team is worse now this week. And so we'll just have to wait and see what happens, I guess, for week 3.
Yeah, and that's the hard part. Everybody gave shit to Jared on the Julio trade, and it turns out that looks good now in his favor. Really, Julio looked great last week. So, it's easy to say now. Hindsight's always 2020. So it'll be fun to look back 3-4 weeks from now and see how that looks. But I just can't believe that we got it done and broke it on the pod. So that one just was about as fun as it gets right there.
I almost was able to potentially. I had a few feelers out there for potential trades that people were interested, but we couldn't quite pull the trigger on it. So you know what? You deserve to get the first trade across the board. It's a little dangerous giving you ability to approve trades because I know you approved your own trade earlier today. So I'm gonna have to keep an eye on you and make sure you're not jeopardizing your power a little too much here, Blondie.
Correct. That is a lot of power being able to just push the trade through. So please, I don't want to do that very often. The only reason I did it a little bit this week was because there was somebody I wanted to pick up. So rather than wait the 30 seconds for you to push it through, because I did text you first and was like, hey, push this through for me. Yeah. So the other thing that you maybe didn't mention now is that my running backs have really been depleted in the matter of 2 days. So, or actually just 1 day. So I'm going to really need those guys to really hang in there and do some work for me. Cause that, like you said, you trade away those running backs, but I'm doing it so early this year, I could regret it down the road. So.
Yep, but I think I guess I have a certain philosophy. So my thing is find a solid pod of 3 for running back and wide receiver. And so that way you're protected from an injury of a running back or receiver. You can throw the other in a flex. So I think you still got the solid top 3 of Mixon, Jones, and Tyson Williams, and then your solid 3 at wide receiver for AJ Brown, McLaurin, and Allen. So you have your core 3 at each position, and then you still have that forever trade value chip with the tight end. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. You lost your RB depth, like you said, but like we said earlier, we draft our RB depth to trade it later in the year. We never plan on actually holding it throughout the year. So that's our whole approach really to the draft.
But typically that RB depth usually gets you at least through some of the bye season a little bit.
Yep.
And so this year we're just going to have to be sort of piecing it together. But yeah, it'll be interesting. So I'm glad we could do that for the people.
We said we couldn't have a guest today, but I guess that's why we knew we were going to have breaking news of a trade. I had a feeling something was going on. There was a lot of trade chatter happening today, but I had a
There
few
was a
feelers,
lot.
but you know what? That's all right. We kind of build character on it all. But with that in mind, I guess we got to jump into the week 3 power rankings so we don't run too long for Axe to bitch at us. So you want to give a quick overview of what we did last week and then start it off with your bottom 4?
Yeah, could you imagine being Axe? If this podcast runs too long, he's gonna be mad about that. Plus, he's missing out on the trade, so could be a tough day to be Axe, man. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is break it up into the chunks again. I'll give you who I had in the bottom 4 in the Sacco playoffs last year. It went from the bottom. It went Sap, which got a little buzz on the old texting sphere. Then Jared, then Schultes, then Pooty. Okay, that was the bottom 4. This week, I'm going to start at the bottom. I'm going to start with Jared. It has nothing to do with that trade. It has everything to do with the fact that he's averaging the lowest 90 points per game. He's 0-2. So I am going to slide him down a spot. Now, the question is, how high did I want to raise Sap? He is 2-0, so I got to give him a little bit of credit. But when you look at the numbers, and I know it's all about wins, but he has scored 214 points, which is very safely number 2 worst in the league. And he has just had easy matchups. So I'm going to slot Sap in at number 9, despite his 2-0 ranking. I'm not trying to overreact, so he's going to have to prove it a little bit more for him to climb up those rankings. And then right above Sap, and Sap's going to hate this, but I've got Pooty right above Sap. So despite being 2-0, he's had over 100 more points scored against him than Sap had in 2 weeks. So if you, break that up per week, that's 50 points more per week. So I think Pooty, despite being 0-2, I think Water will find its level. I'm not going to overreact. I still like his team. So I've got him at the 8 spot. And then I've got Schultes at 7. So he did climb up 1 spot just outside of that threshold, making the playoffs. Like I said, I had a tough time with Schultes. I didn't quite know what to do. I feel like he has that sleeping tiger of a team. Getting a win last week with Kamara scoring, 5 or 6 points. So I do like his team. And I think Kamara blowing up is only a matter of time. So I have him just missing the playoffs. So basically, I have the same 4 teams in the bottom 4, just maybe a little different order. What do you think about that?
I'm sorry. I had to make sure I confirmed the second part of the trade and officially put that through. So we officially have both sides executed. But so I did think it was funny really quickly that you talked about how much you love Pootie's team and you put him 3rd at the 8 slot overall. So I did get a good laugh out of that.
He is 0-2. So, part of it, it's like, okay, part of it you got to win. And now this week he gets Ross. So we'll talk about that maybe in a little bit in the preview of the matchups coming up. So Pooty really needs a win. So he does not want to start 0-3. So I do have Pooty at the 8 slot because he is 0-2, but I do have him ahead of Sap.
Yep. So I guess my high level rationale, I think Jared right now is the clear cut choice for the last spot. And so I don't think we have to spend much time on that. I guess I didn't look too much and compared to some of the other teams, but I don't know if I really have. I think Pootie's team, because he's just behind the 8 ball, I think I would start him at number 9 or 8 slot. But I do think he has a good team, so I could see him rising. But for right now, Schultes, I kind of see potentially down there. Another team, I guess I kind of wonder about, and it's just because of where they're at in certain positions. It's a pretty big fall, I guess, potentially would just be built and see where he is. I know maybe not these bottom 4, but I just worry about those receivers and his flex position that he's going to run out every week. But honestly, I think I would give Sap, you put at 9. That's going to be the one everyone's talking about. Traditionally, in fantasy football, we've gone 13 weeks, and traditionally, if you're 6-7, you're either tied for a playoff spot, or 7-6, you're making it. With the extra week this year, 7 is pretty much going to be the holy grail. If you get to 7-7 on the year, you make the playoffs. Sap's already at 2, so he's already got 2 out of the 7 out of the way. So I don't know if your go forward projection is what you're trying to think of, who's going to make the playoffs or how quality the teams are. But I think with Sapp having 2 wins under his notch already, I would probably give him the 6th spot and being 1 spot outside of the Sacco as opposed to the 9 spot you got him.
No, that's fair. The other thing I wanted to mention is you ran these numbers into the Fantasy Pros system. And so Pooty, despite being 0-2 in that system, don't they have him ranked like 3rd?
Right now, they have him currently ranked number 4, and I think they update daily. And so he's actually tied for 3rd with another team that you haven't mentioned yet. So we'll get to them, I'm assuming, later. I don't want to skew your rankings at all.
So, I mean, to me, that is saying that that's not a biased opinion or anything. I mean, I think, you know, I think Pooty is a legitimate team. So I've got those
with that in mind, I guess I will cut in one last thing. Shane is currently ranked last in those power rankings.
So not to have like confirmation bias, but that's what I'm saying, Sapper. It's not just me, man. It's not just me. He does have 2-0, so he can talk a little shit right now, but he's got to continue that. He's not in the playoffs yet. So that's who I've got for the bottom 4. Right above that is that middle tier, basically the people that just sneak in. So here's kind of what I did. Basically, last week we had Luddy, me, and then you, Curb. So basically, because we had a giant mover, who I'll touch on later, I basically slid everybody down a slot. So right now I have myself at 6, then Luddy at 5, and then 4 at Axe. Again, I don't want to overreact to some of these, but this middle tier is super balanced this year. A lot of 1-on-1 teams. I said that after we drafted, and I think it's proving true right now. We have the middle of our teams are very balanced. So that's where I've got the middle tier. Basically, no big overreactions. Nobody slid down. That's who I got in my middle tier. What do you think about that?
Yep. So obviously I haven't touched base on it, but based on last week's power ranking, it sounds like I might be your big mover. Overall, I think you have yourself a little too low for my liking because I liked your overall team. I know I touched base on that last weekend, probably harping on it again. I think for total points scored, I believe you might be the top scoring team on the season. So I think giving yourself a little bit too low, you're trying to undersell yourself. It's like, oh, I'm this poor little guy. I'm barely making the playoffs. Don't fall for that bullshit. He thinks he's a lot better than a team barely making the freaking Yarski playoffs. So these power rankings are officially under protest by your commissioner, but we can proceed on from there. But after that, Luddy, so I think Luddy's potentially in an interesting spot. I think you touched base on there is a very crowded middle. So like I was potentially saying built for the last spot in the Sacco. I could see Luddy's team being in there as well. So I think they're kind of interchangeable, but Luddy's team's been killed with injuries. So he needs some help in that area. So I could actually see him being that last team in the Sacco to join potentially Jared, Pooty, and Sab. I think I would have Kyler at the 7th spot.
And that's the middle part is we're really splitting hairs. Again, it's early in the season, and maybe think of last week's power ranking as like that initial college football rankings where it's like they don't really mean a lot because there's not a lot of data, but it's hard to move some of those teams if there's not a lot happening. So I think as we go, we'll be able to maybe see some. But right now, like you said, that middle is just slammed. It's splitting hairs, and I think it's going to make for a fun football year. So that's who I've got in the middle tiers. You nailed it. I've got you as the big mover. Obviously, if you drop 160, that's a big deal. Even though you had the lowest amount of points last week, the week before, you drop 160. I tend to buy more into the high point total than I do the low point total, which is why I didn't have you buried despite the least amount of points last week. So right now I've got Built in at 3. Again, not trying to overreact after 1 week. Then I've got you at 2, and then I've got Ross at 2-0. Didn't score a lot of points, but again, wins the matchup of the undefeateds, again, on the back of Kyler Murray and Kelsey, like we've touched on. So I've got basically from the bottom 3, Built, Curb, Ross in the power rankings for this week.
Do you have what it was last week? I'm trying to remember who we had. I know we had, was it Axe? We had Ross at number 1, then Built, then Axe.
Then Axe. So basically, we just kind of slid everybody down a slot, moved you up. Again, try not to overreact on 1 week's it's early in the season, not trying to overreact.
Yep. So like you said, we only have a 2 week sample size, so it's hard to truly know like which team do you believe? Do you believe it's my first week where I dropped the lowest, or the second week where I dropped the highest? Ross has been consistently near the top, and so that's why I think he's the clear-cut choice at number one. And besides that, I think it's a whole bunch of people meshed in the middle, and so it's the question of which roster construction you like the best. So to review, you had your bottom four being Jared, then Sapp, then Pooty, then Schultes, followed by
Yep.
yourself, which is too low. I think I would give you potentially the 2 or the 3 spot. Luddy,
Well, thank
Axe,
you. I appreciate that.
and then Built, myself, and then Roscoe at the top of the power ranking. Is that correct?
Right. Yep.
Gotcha.
Again, and I just try not to overreact on 1 week. You know, I know it's early, so that's half of the sample size, but try not to overreact. I think as we keep going, you'll really get a feel for what teams truly are. So I just am trying not to overreact. So I know you're saying like I'm too low. I do like my team. I do have the highest points scored over the first 2 weeks, but again, small sample, try not to overreact. So.
Yep, absolutely. And like I said earlier, there's the Fantasy Pros Power Rankings, which is a famous fantasy website that kind of syncs with our league every single day, I think, to see what it has. I'm gonna see if we can potentially share and kind of show everybody what it kind of showcases. See if we can get this for our YouTube followers instead of people just listening. If this actually works, can you actually see it, Zach?
I like this. I like this. I like this a lot.
Can you see it?
I can see it.
Hell yeah. So here is the Fantasy Pros Power Ranking. And this is one important distinction is rest of season. So this is not taking into account your current record. It's just saying from week 3 on, what do we think that you're going to do for the rest of the year? And so right now, it currently has myself at the number 1 spot. It says where I'm strong and where I'm weak. It says I might have the strongest starters, but I'm weak in my bench spot. And so those are the kind of areas that we're touching base on. They like your team the second most, and they say your starters might be struggling, but with all that running back depth, obviously before your trades today, you had the strongest bench. And then focusing on Poozy's team, which is 0-2, but you see he has the strongest flex in Cooper Kupp, and then a whole bunch of middle ground, and then his quarterback and tight end have struggled to date. So I know that I think it's just a matter of time before Pooty gets his quarterback right, with Herbert throwing for over 300 yards both games. He just hasn't done the touchdowns. So that could be a huge area where he improves. So, and then touching base on some of these bottom teams, they have Shane. He is absolutely elite when it comes to wide receiver, quarterback, and defense. But look at the running back, tight end, and flex, which are running back and flex in particular are very important positions. And that's where he seems to struggle. They say he has the 7th best starters and the worst bench in the league. And so that's potential area concern. And then the other team, which I was surprised how low they are, was Built's team, where he pretty much just has no elite groups out of this all, which kind of surprised me when I just kind of looked hindsight, but I kind of understand it. Where his only starter that's above average, because Zeke has struggled as his RB1, is Najee Harris is the 4th best RB2 in the whole league. But outside of that, he's just got middling players at every position with an average bench. So it'll be interesting. I know year after year Built does fairly well in fantasy, and so these obviously are subject to a lot of change, but we'll kind of see what happens from this going forward, and kind of go from there.
This is cool. You're gonna have to keep this up for the as we go through the power rankings from now on. So the big differences would be Built, who I've got at the 3 spot, and they've got down at the 9 spot. And the other one would probably be Pooty, who I've got at the 8 spot, but they've got up at the 4 spot. But that's me saying he's 0-2 now, but I do think Pooty has a potential to make a run here down the stretch. So that's cool. I like that.
Yep, for sure. And now comes the interesting part where I need to figure out how to stop sharing my screen here, because I kind of just did it on a whim here. So we'll see if I can get this figured out. Stop share. Let's go. Boom. My back?
Back, baby.
Woohoo. All right, shit. There we go. So we can kind of incorporate that to after your power rankings reveal and go from there. But with that in mind, I think we just have one last thing we kind of want to touch on. I didn't do as much digging into the week 3 matchups, so why don't you touch base really quick on some of the matchups that catch your eye while I look through the matchups and give any high-level reviews after you give your analysis, my man.
All right. I want to point out 2 matchups, and they both have a common thread. Both are going to be major upset alerts. We've got Ross playing Pooty. So you on paper you think, okay, Pootie's 0-2, Ross is 2-0, probably should be a big time favorite. But Pootie's going to get desperate. You know what they say, the hungry dog runs faster. So Pootie cannot start out 0-3. He needs to get W's. So Pootie's gonna go balls to walls. He's gonna get his team up ready to go this week against the number 1 seed. So Ross Ross is a good manager. He's got to get his team on upset alert. The other one would be our boy Sapper, who we've talked a lot about. He's 2-0, but Schultes is that lurking dog, that lurking team. Kamara has been very calm so far. He does play New England, so that's a tough matchup. But Schultes is that he's that team you better watch out for. And I think Sap being 2-0, maybe getting a little big-headed. I don't know. I've heard he's been texting, that he's got his stuff figured out. So, hey, maybe he'll prove us wrong. But I got both of those two on upset alerts, both 2-0 teams.
That is going to be a very interesting one. I think they're both prime candidates because, like we said, Pootie's team, Fantasy Pros likes him. We kind of like him. He's just been unlucky to this point, and he's really trying to find that RB2. But right now he's got a lot more RB depth. So if he can solve that one position, his team is a lot stronger. I love the other matchup too. Shane, we always talk him down, but he keeps winning. And you know what? That's all that matters is getting the W. So we'll see what happens. Schultz is potentially the sleeping giant, but last year we said the same thing. And you know what? McCaffrey kept on sleeping. So You never know what's going to happen.
You are absolutely right, though. Sap's allowed to talk all the shit he wants as long as he's winning. Winning solves everything. So I can't say that much to Sap because he's allowed to talk shit when he's 2-0.
Amen to that. And the only other matchup I kind of caught while looking through it really quick that kind of caught my eye was I'm intrigued by the Built versus Josh matchup. So the early year, we usually have a whole bunch of divisional matchups. And then we usually also have a cross-divisional matchup where one team from the Natty Light division plays one team from the Bush. And typically, you'll always want your team, as long as it's not you, you want the other team to win because you want your division mates to technically do badly so you have a better chance of the bye. I think Josh and Built got very even teams. I think a lot of it comes down to Saquon. I know he's not 100%, but playing an Atlanta defense, which isn't the strongest. So is he going to come up on top? And then with Built, it's just the question of his receivers. Is he going to guess who it's right? Right now, he currently has Pittman in versus Tennessee. I don't know if he sticks with that with potentially Carson Wentz being out, but his other receivers options are Jamar Chase versus Pittsburgh and Antonio Brown has COVID. So he said maybe he'll do the Rondale Moore lottery ticket. Maybe he goes there. So I think that'll be a very interesting matchup in terms of who he wants to go with and kind of go from there.
So the start-sit decisions will be important, but the best part of that matchup is we're going to be sitting there with a tight game, and Axe is going to have Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, and Built's going to have Amari Cooper on the other side. So you just know, and he's going to have Zeke too. So you just know that Monday night's going to be huge, pivotal. We've already seen a couple matchups come down to that Monday night game. So I'm predicting we're going to have another one here with the Axe Biltino matchup.
Yep, no game is out. No matter how much points Josh may be down, he can 100% come back with a Dak and CeeDee Lamb stack. So that is going to be very fun to watch. And it is also, I forgot to mention this, but I noticed this earlier. I think we're getting shades of 3 to 4 year old Built. He now has 3 QBs on his roster this week. So
I know.
Bring back the old days, Biltino. I respect that. He's now starting Daniel Jones, which, despite him being white, he can run, and he's played well the first 2 weeks. And so it'll be very interesting to see Daniel Jones starting in a fantasy football lineup with only 10 teams.
I literally texted him today and said the same thing. Number one, can't believe you're going to start Daniel Jones. The ball's on you. And I also said the fact that life has come full circle and he now has 3 quarterbacks on his roster. So some things are just meant to be, and that's just a beautiful sight.
Yep, amen to that. And so long the circle of life keeps continue with him not winning the championship, I'm happy with it. That means one less person I got, 2 less. Jared's never going to win. So that means 1 in 8 shot. There we go. But, man, I think that's about all that I really had. We had the breaking news. We had the 3-way trade, which we got both pushed through. We have how many trades is that for you this year? 3 now?
I think I've got one with Ross, one with Jared. and one with Jared. So yeah, 3.
Oh, taking advantage of Jared, the greatest pastime of the Yarski fantasy football. But in his defense, I actually did like his side of the Julio trade more.
Thank you. And I think when we look back, there's been quite a few that Jared actually won that he got a lot of shit for that we didn't ever go back and look at. And it's like, well, Zach just gets a little too antsy and a little too bored and likes to trade and gets that rush going, that adrenaline kick when he does a trade. So I think if you look back, there's been many times where Jared has actually fleeced me when he got shit like he was getting taken advantage of. So
I know it's the greatest pastime, completing trades. That's what I love about our league. That's the only reason I hate how I drafted. But you know what? Every year you got to change up the strategy a little bit. But with that in mind, I think that's about everything we have, my man. Any lasting remarks before we close it out for the people?
Nope. Feels good to be back. I suppose we'll see most everybody at the reunion. I know you got a wedding, but it'll be kind of fun to talk a little shit in person. So
I know got some serious FOMO because I feel like there's going to be fancy trades happening on the golf course after a few shots, but you know what? It is what it is, and it's how it's going to be. And until then, everybody, we'll see you next week. And good luck to everybody except for Bill or Jared. Fuck you.
Peace, Kurt.
Later. Oh, I stopped the video. I didn't stop the recording. Whoopsie.